Well, good morning, everybody. I'm John. Thank you all for getting up early to come out here. It was quite an adventure for me. This is my first time in Alexandria. I've driven past it many times, my way back and forth between Shreveport and Baton Rouge over the years when I was working for LSU. And I have someone on my team currently in Shreveport who's from Alexandria, and she talks about it very fondly often. So I'm very excited to be here, get a chance to see the town and meet everybody here. My journey in making has been a lifelong one. I've been working on creating things my whole life. About 8 years ago, I got the opportunity to come to Northwest Louisiana and be part of lifting the digital media world a little bit there. And I'll tell you a little bit about that. But first, a little bit about myself and kind of how my journey kind of brought me to where I am today, and then a little bit about what we're doing, and then on to a little bit about the DMI. But the thing to get us started in this journey is where am I from? Well, I'm from New Jersey. How many of you have ever been to New Jersey? Anybody been to New Jersey? Okay, so the very first question I always get when somebody says you're from New Jersey is what? What exit, right? So if you're in New Jersey, there's two major arteries actually. So you have the Turnpike and the Parkway, and the exits are different. So I want to get that straight right away. Get that out of the way. So it's either exit 13 or exit 137, depending on where which direction you're coming from, on the Turnpike or the Parkway. So I grew up in a small town in northeastern New Jersey, about 45 minutes outside New York City. About 330,000 people in Elizabeth, New Jersey, where I came from. Very close to Newark Airport. An older manufacturing town. We had the Singer manufacturing plant there in the 19th century up until the late 1970s. A lot of industrial stuff in the area around where I grew up. My dad was actually an auto worker. Actually, a bunch of my family members were auto workers at General Motors there, and that had a big impact on me growing up. So my dad's there. My dad, my mom, myself, and my sister in the 1970s. We are an immigrant family. My dad was from Cuba. He immigrated in the 1960s. When I was growing up, my dad was learning to speak the English language, so he always had a very thick accent. But he was one of those people that could make anything. My dad could fix, it didn't matter what it was, he could fix it, he could figure it out. He didn't have the internet, he just had this incredible ability to understand things and make them work. And it's something that I grew up around. We're working with him on projects, helping him out. He had an auto body shop. He was always doing projects and renovations and fixing things. So I learned from a very early age that rolling your sleeves up, using your hands, figuring things out was a big part of the experience of making things and being part of the world, or the material culture that we all live in. My dad wasn't an artist. His aesthetic abilities were somewhat questionable. He collected a lot of junk over his life, but he was just an incredible maker of things and fixer of things. Many years later, after I was grown, I got a chance to go to Cuba and actually see the town where my dad grew up. And all those years, I always thought my dad was good at fixing stuff because he was a hardworking guy and he'd immigrated to the United States. But I actually had a perspective on my dad's making experience by going to Cuba and realizing that it's an island. It's a culture of people who don't have a lot of resources. Even before the revolution, if you wanted something on the island of Cuba, you had to bring it there. And once you brought it there, you had to keep it working. That's an island mentality. And I often joke with people about Northwest Louisiana being a small island nation. It's very much like that. So you have to work with what's around you. Okay, you have to work with the stuff that you bring with you. So that's kind of what I grew up with. That's my dad a couple of years ago with one of my project trucks. So I grew up around this culture of making things. I have a tremendous interest in stuff, mechanical things, technological things, things that fly, things that roll, things that are beautiful. I have this wonderful fusion of art and technology in me. But that came from my dad and from fixing stuff. This is one of the project cars my dad left me. This is my workshop in Shreveport, my bicycles, my car stuff. I would do this stuff no matter where I am. So I got to Louisiana and I started sort of to assemble all of this. and it had to be part of my world. I brought one of my car projects down and I built that up. I've got 4 vintage cars now that are in various states of repair that I work on when I have time. And I love working with my hands and making things. And that's kind of been a part of my world and part of my culture and part of what I tried to bring to folks with what we're doing with making things. So my journey began at the School of Visual Arts in New York. I grew up in a gifted and talented arts program, like your magnet schools you have here in Louisiana, and I went on to SVA in the early 90s, and I studied photography, traditional photography, and I learned basically how to do almost everything you could think of to do with non-digital photography. Up until the early 90s, there was no digital photography, and I learned to use view cameras. I learned to use do film processing, both black and white and color, advanced color printing, black and white printing, handling sheet films. We learned to mix emulsions. I mean, all kinds of really technical stuff. I loved it. I loved the art and creativity component of all this stuff. But there was one big problem. That 1950s Leica I was holding was definitely on its way out. Because I was about to be massively disrupted by this. This is a Macintosh, very similar to the very first one I used at SVA. In my I guess somewhere along the way they forced us to take a computer Photoshop class. In Photoshop, you'll notice the copyright date on this. This is actually the version that I was using in school. Was copyrighted right around the time that I was in college. So we'd get on these things and we would do color digital photo manipulation, which took a tremendous amount of effort in those days with these computers, and you can't even see color. You can't even see very much of a grayscale on this computer, and the resolution's really tiny, and we'd have to go and make separations and take them to an image setter, and they'd print out color prints, and we'd do it 5-6 times to get the colors right. It was a real big project to do this stuff in that time period, but I realized pretty early in this process that there was no way this wasn't going to change everything, right? Because all of the stuff I was learning to do in the darkroom was so much more flexible and easier to do in the computer than it was in the darkroom. And I could remove things from photographs. I could add things to photographs. I could montage photographs together much easier than I could through multiple printing. And there was a photographer and printer, a guy named Jerry Yulesman, who famously did a lot of really great stuff in the 1970s and 80s just using darkroom techniques. But that took hours. I could do it in minutes on this thing. And I realized that this was going to change the world. I was really scared. I didn't know what to do because I was just about to graduate from college. I had a skill set that was basically World War II technology. So what do? Well, being a young man and being at a very good school, they happened to have a good program, a master's program in computer graphics. So I decided pretty much right after college to get into computer graphics by going to graduate school. So I started the grad school at SVA. In 1993. Now, this was just after Jurassic Park had come out. We were just seeing the very, very first high-end 3D computer graphics hitting the mainstream of the world. I mean, up until right before this, computer graphics was non-interface, which meant you had to do everything in a text editor and program everything. This computer system here changed all that. This is a Silicon Graphics Workstation, or an SGI. These were very expensive computers that typically were about $100,000 a piece for the computer and the high-end software that ran on them. And the computer graphics department at SVA, the graduate program, had about 6 of these things. So they had a lot of money in these machines, and it was a great program because you could get access to this technology. And we'd be up day and night, all night long, working on these computers and rendering at night and working during the day and all kinds of things to get access to them. And you'd be fighting with people over computers that are less powerful than my phone is today. I'm not even kidding. These were computers that at the time could run high-end 3D computer graphics programs from companies like Alias, Softimage, TDI. Again, you don't remember these names are not real popular now, but Alias went on to become Maya, which is owned by Autodesk, which is the main program we use today to make most of this stuff. More on that later, but the SGIs were really important. And so I went to graduate school, and I started grad school in '93, and I finished it I took a break in the middle, and then I finished it later. But it was a great experience. I got to work with some great people, some great instructors, and I had to learn to program. I had to learn to work with these computers when they were a lot harder to work with than they are today. So these workstations were expensive and difficult to work with. So enter R. Greenberg and Associates. So this is a company in New York City. RGA, that was founded by a couple of brothers who were heirs to the Coca-Cola bottling dynasty in the New York area. So these guys were very rich, and they wanted to get involved in the movie business. So they got involved in the movie business, and they were making a lot of movie trailers and movie openings using traditional film techniques. So they had a motion control stage, they had a model shop, and they started to get into computer graphics. So they brought in some of the very first computer graphics technologists from NYIT. And this is before I got there. This is in the 1980s. So when I arrived at about 1993, they were using these SGIs very heavily. So I was involved with SGIs, so I got to work with them. And while I was there, I got a chance to work on television commercials featuring some of the very first motion capture technology that was available from the famous Flock of Birds system. There was a TV commercial series called Shell Dancing Cars, where the cars actually danced with the gas pumps, and that was done with motion capture, one of the first TV commercials that was done with that. Shaq versus Shaq, the film The Shadow, and a whole bunch of other projects while I was at RGA. And RGA was a great experience because it was such a well-established company, and they had been working on this stuff, doing optical printing and traditional animation. They worked on Who Framed Roger Rabbit and all that stuff. But it was a great experience to get involved in that process and be part of a place that was on the bleeding edge. They had their own 3D renderer, which they wrote from scratch. So if you don't know what 3D rendering is, it's basically the process of taking a wireframe model and turning it into a full three-dimensional image you can use to play back in animation or video. The software that does this is called rendering software, and it actually gives the images its quality and its surfacing and all that stuff. And they wrote their own from scratch in the 1990s. So it was a pretty big deal. Like when we needed to do a commercial that had grass growing, we would go talk to Bob, the programmer, and Bob would write the renderer to do grass. I mean, literally, he wrote the stuff as we were going. It's great. So I got to be around that stuff and meet all those people and network with that group of people, and it was really great, really formative experience for me in New York. So I got involved pretty heavily with client-driven compositing. So compositing is the layering of images. It's the final assembly of images before they go into a TV commercial or a film. It's sort of like Photoshop for moving imagery, if you can think about it that way. So we take layers of images and we put them together, and typically it's a person who's got a good eye for both movement and color and composition, and cares about detail and the quality of images, becomes a compositor. And I train compositors today at the DMI. We'll talk about that more later on. So this is a system that was very prevalent in the 1990s called Flame. So this was on one of those SGI mini computers, and it was a very powerful, almost real-time system where you could actually work with a client in the room with you. So the clients would sit here and usually eat sushi while I sat here and sweat a lot, slaving over the computer, working away at making the commercials look good, taking things out, putting these in, removing wrinkles, enhancing things, making the hair shinier, all those things that we would do in TV commercials to make things look really good. And these rooms would bill out sometimes $800 to $1,000 an hour. At one point, I actually started a company called Revolver Visual Effects and Design, and we actually owned one of these machines. It was a very expensive machine that billed out for quite a lot of money. It was a very specialized skill set. So it took me a lot of work and a lot of effort to get that skill set, but it was a very formative experience for me to be able to work with clients directly in a room, working on this stuff. We'd come in the morning, and in the evening, we'd have a TV spot on the air. I mean, that's how fast you do this stuff with this technology. It still exists. It's still used in a very, very niche part of the market. But it's a lot of, I really enjoyed my time doing this stuff. These are some of the clients I worked for in my time in New York, in the agencies and in my company, and they range from Pfizer to this guy, Kanye West. I did a music video for him. We did a lot of work with MTV VH1, did the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame opening a couple of years, did a lot of work with all these guys. We're all agency clients from Bates. So I did a lot of advertising and television content before I moved into feature films. So these are some of the folks I had a chance to work for and with, and it was a lot of fun. Projects on the television side, the projects tend to be smaller and very intense, and you don't really get to polish things to the level that you do in feature films. But it's a lot of fun to work on a lot of stuff in a very short period of time. So this is probably about a 3 to 5 year period in my career. I worked on all this. I worked with all these companies, so it was a lot of fun. And along the way, I got the chance to learn to fly a plane, which was kind of cool. I put that up there because it's just something I really enjoyed. And I tell people, of all the things that I've done, probably with the exception of my daughters, you know, this was one of the best experiences of my life because I had to peak both in terms of my abilities to fly the plane and the intellectual learning that was involved, and also conquering the fear of not flying this thing into the ground. So it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. This is the nuke compositing system. And this is actually what we use today pretty prevalently. It's a procedural compositing system, which means you hook the tools together in a flowchart form to make a finished image. And it's similar to the system that I showed you earlier, to the Flame system, but it's all software driven. So there's no specialized hardware. It runs on a general purpose workstation, and we render it on a farm of computers. And this is used, I mean, every feature film you see visual effects in today runs through this piece of software. Every animated feature you see today runs through this piece of software. It's the prevalent high-end piece of software that everyone is using. Requires a little bit of a technologist's mind to do this well. You know, and problem solving and technological prowess are really important. So when I teach this software to people, a lot of times, even at the university level, I teach them how to problem solve because they don't come to me always with having that ability to actually step through a flow chart and solve a broken flow chart, basically, to solve that technological gap. You know, a lot of what I've done is this fusion of art and technology, which I had kind of an innate ability with, growing up with my dad and playing with all that stuff. And I just didn't think about it growing up until I got to education, that some people have to be taught this. We all have the ability to do it, but some people have to be taught the steps. So something I had to do quite a bit at LSU was teach people how to problem solve so they could learn these softwares. So my career took me up to Canada, where I worked on a bunch of feature films, most notably this Disney feature, The Wild. I worked on that for almost 2 years, and that's what the project brought me to Toronto. And that's where I also met my wife there. And I got a chance to go and work on these other visual effects films and a whole bunch more. They're on my IMDb page if you want to check them out. And then I got a chance to go back after I was in New York for a while, go back and work on Harry Potter at IMAX. And I always joke with everyone that the Harry Potter film was my biggest credit because my name was about 8 feet across. Because the IMAX screen's so big. I really enjoyed working both for Disney and IMAX, and I love Toronto and I love the people there, and I've got a great network of friends all across Canada, and I would go back in a heartbeat. I really like it up there, except for the weather. So back to New York City and the U.S. and more visual effects, feature film compositing, a company called Brainstorm, then later Cafe Effects in California and Real Effects in Texas. So I got the chance to move into leadership roles and as a lead and supervisor in compositing and features, which is kind of, you know, one of the things that I always wanted to do in my career. I wanted to move into more leadership roles. I got a chance to do visual effects supervision, a lot of commercials, but I really liked leading teams of people. It was fun. You know, it was good getting a group of people to get a show out was much more challenging than going on a set and babysitting a director. So enter LSU Shreveport. This is where my Louisiana journey began. I was actually recruited to come to LSU through a production company that was looking to bring me to Louisiana to train a group of compositors and lead them on a project. And she said, well, I can't find enough qualified people in Shreveport area, because they were shooting in Shreveport. So this is like circa 2008. They couldn't find enough qualified people for me to train. So I basically, you know, she said, well, but the university's got a whole bunch of money to start a program, and they can't find anybody. And I read your resume, and all the way at the bottom of your resume is this master's degree. I said, well, yeah, well, I've got a master's degree. Most people don't pay attention to that. In the field, they look at your last 2 places you've worked and look at your demo reel. That's how they hire you in working in production. Nobody cares if you've got a master's degree or a PhD or anything like that. The university contacted me. She put me in touch, and they flew me down to Shreveport. I was in Toronto at the time. And I gave a talk, and after I stepped off the little stage there, just like this one, they offered me the job on the spot. And I went back to Toronto and I begged my wife for 3 days. And took 3 days, and my knees are still sore from that. But it took some time to get her to kind of get her head around Shreveport. So we moved down to Shreveport, and that's where the LSU journey began. So I started from nothing at LSU Shreveport. There were no classes, there was no computers, there was no curriculum, there was no people, there was nothing. It was just empty rooms. And I developed a program from scratch. I hired faculty. I promoted the program. I administrated the technology. The whole kit and caboodle, from 0 to about 150 students a day. I stepped down at LSU 5.5 years later. Now, for Shreveport, Louisiana, 150 students is a big deal, okay? For a school of 4,300 people, that's a significant program to go from scratch in a 5-year space. The problem I had at LSU Shreveport was the pyramid-shaped attainment of 4-year degree institutions, period. Whether you're talking about Harvard or you're talking about LSU Shreveport, most people in the United States don't finish 4-year degrees. It's about a third of people who start 4-year degrees finish them. So what that meant was I had really full 100-level courses. I had half those people going on to the 200 level, half again going on to the 300 level, and by the time I got to the 400 level, I went from having classes that were full with 40 people in them to 6 people. No matter what I did, I couldn't change that pyramid-shaped attainment. So I said, well, what do you do in a situation like that? You know, there's got to be a way to solve that problem. I'm a person that likes to chip away at things, right? I like to try and figure things out if I can. So we developed a second program. I'm going to tell you about it in just a sec, but this is just some of the stuff. This is one of our main classroom we built at LSU Shreveport. My colleague Rafael, this is Christina. This is actually Dana McCommon, who built this motion control rail that I designed. It's a motion control system that allows you to take a camera and move it and take pictures one at a time, and actually do stop motion, similar to what we did at our Greenberg and Associates back in the 90s. So we could do motion control passes. This is our green screen studio that we built. So we built 4 classrooms and labs, and also heavy computer infrastructure, render farm, 3D printing, green screen stage with motion capture. So we did quite a lot at LSU Shreveport in the 5 years we were there. I was the single most successful grant earner on an individual basis in the history of the LSU Shreveport campus. When I stepped down to go start DMI, I brought in $3.2 million, or brought in or administrated $3.2 million, and also was recipienting the single largest grant of $1 million from the Caddo Parish Commission that the school had ever received on an individual basis, again, in the history of the school. So I was very successful with grants with the various state programs, and so we did NSF, we did the Board of Regents grants, we did a couple of other grants in the Caddo Parish grants. So we had to bring money in to do this. This stuff doesn't cost, this stuff is not inexpensive. So the computers are expensive, the software is expensive, the people to teach it are expensive. So we had to bring a lot of money in the door to make this happen. So this is our 3D printer that we got with the Board of Regents grant that would factor in later on the Academy Award win. That's our render farm, again, our classroom and our student labs. These are some of the projects I got a chance to work on as a freelancer that were done with our 3D printer for a couple of local groups. This is the eye examiner. It's actually a device that holds a panoptic onto a iPhone to allow you to photograph and video a human retina. Again, this is groundbreaking technology stuff, because up until then, you needed a very specialized machine to do this. This actually took off-the-shelf. Most ophthalmologists have this scope, and you stick an iPhone on it, and you can actually get a surgical consult and all that stuff. So this actually got sold back to White Allen, the company. I wasn't involved in the business side of it, but I just did the rapid prototyping and design for it. And this is another project actually with the same guy called the Wearzy. It's actually a Bluetooth tracker for your kids. So you can stick it on your kid and you can figure out where they are. So we did the industrial design and 3D printing for that. So along the way at LSU Shreveport, we got to know the folks that would go on to form Moonbot Studios, Bill Joyce, Lambert Enox, and Brandon Oldenburg. And in 2010, we won the Academy Award in short film. Now, we got a chance to bring the team together. So that was my students, my staff, all the Moonbot people, and the various contractors that worked on it. If you have not seen the short, it's a short film that features miniature backgrounds and computer-generated characters in the foreground. So these are actually some images from the set. That's John Skirman, one of my former students, where he worked at Moonbot for a couple of years, holding the Oscar. They're very heavy if you've never held one. Don't drop it on your foot. These are actually the miniature books that we did on the 3D printer from these models here, and then we made hundreds of copies of these that were hand-painted and put into the backgrounds here. This is our base camp, so this is our pipeline. We took the images off the motion control camera here. This is me conferring with the directors of photography. I did the on-set visual effects supervision for Morris Les Moore. We shot it in about a week. That's John, that's Ralph, and that's Kay Park. So we would take the images off the camera, put them through a pipeline, check them, get them ready for the editorial to use, and then the editor would actually cut them into the animatic, and we put them onto the iPhones of the directors right there on the set, which in 2010, when this was done, this was bleeding edge stuff. I mean, nobody's doing this kind of stuff in Shreveport at the time. Enter the DMC. So we were trying to solve this problem where we couldn't get enough quality people out the door from the LSU program. So I went and talked to Millennium Studios at the time, had a large operation, about 60 people in Shreveport doing visual effects, and the supervisor was a friend of mine. I went and talked to him. Who are you hiring from? Well, this is a school in Florida that has a one-year program, and they're really quite good. Some people we get are awesome. So that's great. Why don't we copy them? So, imitation being the sincerest form of flattery, right? So I went to the Caddo Parish Commission, which is our I don't have to explain parish here, I'm sorry. I always say parish county. You guys know parishes. Anyway, and I put in an ask for $1 million over 2 operational years for this program. And it took me about 2 years of my life to get this money. But it was actually very well timed, and it was very much a game changer. Because at the time, and unfortunately to this day, the LSU budgets continue to shrink every year, and I really didn't have the kind of support I needed, I had to get. I wasn't going to be able to sustain the program on the general fund revenue we were getting from the school. So I had to find revenues to keep the programs afloat. So the model we came up with was this 1-year intensive funnel program, and we got Caddo Parish to give us the money. Moonbot helped out. Millennium Studio has helped out with the ask. We took the Oscar down to the parish chamber and handed it to all the commissioners. It was hilarious. They're all taking selfies. It's on public record. You can look it up. It's on the website. But anyway, we got the money and we developed this 1-year program. Sorry, let me back up. That program we ran for 1 year at LSU Shreveport. During that year, we realized to make the program truly self-sufficient and accreditable that we could not actually host the program at LSU Shreveport. We had to take the program outside of the 4-year school to be able to accredit it so that it could support itself and stand up as a standalone institution. That was the only way for the program to survive because we weren't allowed to have a program like this independently accredited at LSU by the accreditors or by the LSU rules or by a whole bunch of other things. So we couldn't do it independently. So we had to go out, we had to become independent for the program to be able to survive on its own. So that was really important to what's going to come next, which is EMI. But anyway, along the way, I've had a chance to work on quite a few projects. Again, there's our MoCo rail. Carburetor I built on the kitchen table and wrecked the table finish. I'm still pissed about that. A recumbent bicycle I rebuilt. These are some of the classrooms at DMI, which we'll see more in a second. More of my car projects, my rover, and just a future project I'm working on right now. So along the way, I'm hacking on things and figuring things out and finding more things to work on. And these are some more of the projects. So this is my 68 Vet that I inherited from my dad. This is actually a computer rendering of what it's going to look like when I'm done with it, hopefully. This is my 53 Chevy pickup, and this is a computer rendering of what it will look like when I'm done with it, hopefully. And this is our race car. Actually, this year, some friends of mine, car buddies in Shreveport, got involved in the Tour de Lemons, a 24-hour race, 24 hours of lemons. It's like they sometimes refer to this as crap can racing. So you race a $500 car in a road race, and I never raced a car in my life. I was terrified. So we took this 2004 Ford Taurus. We legitimately paid $500 for, put a roll cage in it, a safety seat, and we took it racing down in Houston. And we competed, and we came in third in our class. And I was responsible for the paint and the decals on the outside of the car. We didn't do it in mechanical. But Mima's Taurus there was competitive in our class. We were very happy with it. So anyway, I get a chance to work on cool stuff. So enter the Digital Media Institute, DMI, what I'm doing today for my day job. So I was encouraged through some friends in the community to talk to the Biomedical Research Foundation, BRF. They are a local group up in Northwest Louisiana. We do economic development as our core mission. BRF, over the last couple of years, we took over the LSU System Hospital and the one in Monroe. So we administrate university health, the PET imaging center. There's about 5 different initiatives of BRF, of which DMI is one. We're about 1/6 of the annual budget of BRF, so we're tiny compared to the hospital. But we're proud of being part of BRF because we're independent of the state of Louisiana now. We are completely independent of anybody except for BRF, so we're a private nonprofit. And we had a chance to actually develop the school into being what it was intended to be, which is a self-supporting, independent operation. And that's actually what makes DMI today.
The fusion of art and technology drives and inspires what we do here at the Community Institute, capturing our students' imaginations and accelerating their careers.
DMI is absolutely the place to go in this region for people who want to start their careers in visual effects or animation for the film industry or game development.
The first time I stepped foot on the campus, I couldn't believe it. This is Shreveport, I said. There is this amazing green screen and motion capture stage. Instructors and students are working on these large screens with workstations and software. It feels just like a high-end studio at DMI.
And we still work on projects in the industry now, whether it's a Hollywood set or a high-end game dev studio, we've all done it. There's not a single instructor here who isn't excited about watching our students light up when our experiences translate to their understanding.
There's such a wide array of opportunities here, from modeling, texturing, and compositing to animation and game development. It's such a great opportunity to learn with these experts by my side and to just soak up the wealth of knowledge that exists here.
Culture is a huge thing here. We work very hard to make that a part of the DMI experience. Almost every month we host events for local artists, industry professionals, students, employers, and alumni to get together and share their experiences, achievements, and expertise. It's a great opportunity for the community, but for students it gives them legitimate pathways for networking.
The work the students are creating is outstanding. It gets better and more refined with every graduating class. Our accelerated model just works better than the traditional options available around here.
In a short, intense period of time, you can authentically learn these digital media skills and leave with a professional portfolio. Now, opportunities that weren't available to you just 12 months ago are yours for the taking. That's freedom.
My time here really helped to